we have as my guest now, John Zmirak. Do not be frightened. You should learn to trust me. I know a lot of people, you get frightened because John is a truth speaker, and the truth can get scary sometimes, but in the end, it's a good thing. It's a good thing. So we've got John on in a moment, but in hour two today, we have my friend Jim Kunstler on the program. I don't like to embarrass people, when they're on the program, but I want to tell you, you know how I've gone on and on and on over the years saying how you need to read what John Zmirak is writing. I feel the same way about very, very few people. Jim Kunstler is one of those people. Go to kunstler.com, subscribe to his Substack. There's nobody like him. He is really something. I've known him for many, many years. So he'll be on in hour two. He is always very worth reading. I really can't say it enough. And right now, a very similar person, John Zmirak. John, I got to tell you, I really was looking forward to talking to you about something today, and I'm glad I just remembered. Before we get into all the news of the day, like a lot of people, when I am really bored or just, I don't know, riding a shuttle bus or something, I will look on Instagram, and the reels on Instagram, I have no idea why it has an algorithm to give me what it gives me from day to day. I cannot for the life of me figure it out. Yesterday, I've never seen him on my Instagram feed before, ever. But I got a ton of Nick Fuentes, who is a very disturbing, awful person. I have to say, when I first heard him talking, I thought, oh, he's saying stuff I agree with. He's saying stuff I agree with. Yeah. But I know he's not somebody that anybody should ever listen to because and sure enough, as more stuff came on board, I thought this guy is an actual racist. People throw that term around. He's an actual racist, unless I'm missing something, what he was saying. And I thought John Zmirak, when he comes on the program tomorrow, I got to ask him to help us understand Nick Fuentes. He seems like a very, because it's funny, like people would love to say that you, John Zmirak, or I, like, oh, we're scary right-wing figures, and just the opposite. But here is an example of somebody who I think is scary.
Um, Nick Fuentes is a real Fed. He is a
What?
real, he's a Fed. He is a federal agent. He is a setup. He is a honey trap. He is working for the deep state, in my opinion. And it is his job to lure MAGA conservatives into the rat hole of anti-Semitism and racial hatred in order to divide and destroy the movement so that people like Gavin Newsom can be elected president. And Nick Fuentes has actually said he's going to vote for Gavin Newsom. Nick Fuentes urged people, January 6 people, to storm the Capitol. Didn't do it himself, was one of the only people not investigated by the deep state in the January 6th crackdown. I am 100% convinced that Nick Fuentes is working for people in the FBI whose job it is, and who are still in place because the purge hasn't come yet, whose job it is to destroy the conservative movement and the Christian church. So if you're following Nick Fuentes, you might as well just be calling up James Comey every day and asking him what you should do and just doing whatever James Comey says.
Well, I mean, look, even if that's not the case, and I have no reason to doubt you, but I'm saying, just putting that aside,
Right.
what he says, and this is why I realize that, maybe sometimes this program can be important because we can help people understand, because I think it's easy to be confused. If you're not sure what you believe, you can get lured in bad directions by people like this. I mean, for example, he'll say, look, this just needs to be laid out. The devil, there's no such thing as a pure lie. You can only twist the truth. So the devil will always present some truth mixed in with twisted truth. Right. So Nick Fuentes, it's kind of like a commercial where they'll tell you something, kind of pull you in. So he'll say, like, I think we have too many people coming across the border. Don't you agree with that? And people are like, yeah, I agree with that. Eric Metaxas agrees with that. We agree with that. Okay, tell me more. And he tells you more and more and more. And eventually he takes it in exactly the direction that the devil takes all good things to twist them. So why do we say we think it's bad that we have too many people coming across the border? I know I'm not a racist. I know it has nothing to do with the color of their skin. But somebody like Nick Fuentes, he makes it about, we're a majority white country and we don't like these dark people coming in. And you just realize that you have been tricked now. Now it's racial. It is racist.
And doesn't that serve the interests of the deep state, which is trying to label any concern about immigration as being racist?
Bingo.
So, right now, I do think he's a federal agent, but more importantly, he's an agent of Screwtape. What the devil does, he takes one strand, like racism is bad. Okay, we agree. We don't like to see civil rights demonstrators attacked by police dogs and sprayed with fire hoses. We don't believe in legal segregation. He uses that to lure people to the radical left, to turn them into communists, to turn them into DEI activists, to turn them into anti-white racists. Then, when people react to that, when they get so disgusted by the radical leftist extreme that many people have been lured into and our institutions have been colonized with, the devil says, oh, I can use this as an opportunity to get people to sin in the opposite direction by becoming ferocious white nationalists, by becoming eugenicists. And he doesn't care. Screwtape doesn't care if you enter hell by the left entrance or the right entrance, as long as you end up in the same place where he gets to feast on you for eternity. So for the longest time, I was fighting against the neoconservatives, the globalists, the people who want to invade the world and invite the world. Now I find myself also having to warn against the extremes in the opposite direction. And that's because it's not because the radical right and the radical left are the same. It's not because they're interchangeable. It's because they're both from hell and they both lead to hell. That's my objection.
Well, yes. It's so funny though, because as I was listening to him, and again, I have no idea why this stuff was coming up like crazy on my Instagram feed. I thought, like, I didn't ask for this, but it just kept coming up.
Well, I would suggest, Eric, that someone in some three-letter deep state agency has the job of baiting prominent, influential conservatives, such as yourself, and trying to see if they can lure them into becoming a follower of Nick Fuentes so they can destroy your influence. So it's not a mystery. It's probably a conspiracy. It's probably
listen. One of the things I got to say that really disturbed me, honestly, was that Alex Jones seems to have no problem with having him on. That really shocked me, because there are certain people I kind of think like, okay, Alex Jones, maybe I don't agree with everything he says, but for him to platform Nick Fuentes, that's a black mark in the book of Alex Jones. Yeah, that is bad.
That is bad.
That is really bad. Really bad.
To me, it's one thing if you want to host a debate and you get a far right and a far left person and you let them go at each other. But just to host and to welcome one person who has such toxic views, I think that's a mistake. And if I were Alex Jones's friend, I would say, please don't do that. And you should actually apologize for doing that.
Well, also, actually, my very dear friend Dinesh D'Souza did a debate with Nick Fuentes, and I don't know if that was a good thing. I have mixed feelings about that, but I have to say, folks, I just want to say this really clearly. Nick Fuentes is a bad guy. Really bad guy on a number of issues. And I don't say this lightly. What I heard, some really bad stuff, like genuine racism, real thing.
Really toxic anti-Semitism. That's his
and vicious anti-Semitism. Yeah. Vicious Jew hatred. Vicious.
Can I tell you, Eric?
Go ahead. Sorry, go ahead.
Right. I don't get epiphanies of the demonic very often, but I occasionally have felt the presence of icy, hostile, demonic spirits. I've felt it in only two circumstances. when I was praying outside an abortion clinics in New York with Operation Rescue back in the 90s, I would feel these icy spirits, especially among the people who were there to support the clinic and to encourage women to come in and go in and kill their babies. And I felt the same icy presence when I ran into genuine anti-Semites, when I saw David Duke speak at LSU because he was running for governor of Louisiana, I felt the
Yes,
same
yes.
demonic spirit.
We got to go to a break, folks. I felt the exact same thing watching Nick Fuentes on Instagram. Not making that up. I don't say that lightly. We'll be right back. Welcome back. Talking to John Zmirak. John, you and I were just talking about a diabolical figure.
I think there's a connection.
Named excuse me, just named Nick Fuentes. We've just been talking about a diabolical figure named Nick Fuentes. He came up on my Instagram feed yesterday, and it was chilling to me because he is the real thing when you talk about a Jew hater, an actual racist. And you said it at the end of the segment, and I agreed with it. It felt diabolical to me. It was gross. It was creepy. Because he has this mocking tone on this kind of stuff. I mean, I have to say, it's a scary thing. And you can see how liberals, if they think that we agree with somebody like that, you can see why they're so freaked out, because they think, I mean, this is the problem, is that people like Nick Fuentes make it possible for confused people to think, oh, Donald Trump is just like that. Or John Zmirak or Eric Metaxas or Charlie Kirk. Oh, they're just like that. We are 1,000% against where Nick Fuentes is coming from.
The same demonic spirits that you feel outside of abortion clinics, that I would feel the same spirits when I encountered hardcore anti-Semites. And I think it's because Satan, the devil, hates innocence. He hates babies. He hates the family. He hates the Holy Family. He hates the Jewish people because God chose them. And so he loves to lure Jewish people into becoming communists or gay activists so that there are hateful things about them. And then he tries to trick us into thinking that what's wrong with them is that they're Jewish, not that this particular person happens to have become a communist and we hate communism. And this is, of course, what Hitler did. He took the very legitimate hatred of communism and he tried to make it about the Jews. He pointed out that some of the communist leaders were Jews. So therefore you should hate every Jew, including the friendly businessman or the guy who sharpens knives or the guy who runs a pawn shop, who are obviously not communists. They're running businesses and they're going to synagogue, but guess what? They're just the same as all those Jews in the NKVD over in Russia. And this is how the devil takes a legitimate thing, like violent hatred of communism, which is an important thing, and twists it into a hatred of individual innocent people. And this is how he lures us to hell, by either the left door or the right door.
You know, I don't know, most people wouldn't maybe remember. I know you will remember, but about 2 years ago, Milo Yiannopoulos brought Nick Fuentes to Mar-a-Lago. And I don't know if they were with Kanye West. I can't remember.
They were.
It was a trio of Jew haters. And I have to say, at one time, I was hopeful about Milo Yiannopoulos. I believed, first of all, I found him very entertaining. As usual, I didn't know enough. So I had him on the program a couple of times. And I was hopeful that he was turning in the right direction, turning toward Christian faith, turning away from his gay lifestyle. But unfortunately, he tacked back hard. And so he is like Nick Fuentes. I don't know if I said it on the program. I think I have.
They've had a violent falling out, of course. They're like clawing each other's eyes out.
Before we get to that, I just want to say that Milo Yiannopoulos posted something on Twitter so vile, ladies and gentlemen. It's not just like, oh, I disagree with it. It was so vile that it seemed demonic. It was mocking the severe injury of my friend Dennis Prager. It was mocking it. And I thought only the devil could do something. Like, it's so evil. So Milo Yiannopoulos has clearly gone hard over to the dark side. Now, listen, repentance is always possible. but this is serious stuff. And so he brings this diabolical figure, Nick Fuentes, to Mar-a-Lago to meet the president, to smear the president with this association.
He did it on purpose. Milo said he did it as an act of revenge against Trump because he didn't feel like he'd been sufficiently rewarded by Trump because he thought he played a major role in Trump's victory in 2016. This is the kind of hysterical, narcissistic, sociopathic grandiosity that tells you that somebody's pretty much unfixable except by a miracle, and you should avoid them at all costs because they will drag you down with them.
Well, I guess, listen, again, this is the reason I wanted to talk about this is because as Christians, we have to clarify, where we stand. And one of the things that I saw on this horrible Nick Fuentes stuff yesterday was it's so clear how he is an actual racist. And so if you say, I am for shutting down the border and I am for deporting illegals, you need to be clear that's not about racism, ladies and gentlemen, okay? It's not about racism, and you need to understand why it's not about racism. You kind of need to understand this stuff, otherwise you get lured into racism. Or, for example, we could talk about John, I know that you've written about it, you want to talk about it, but this murder in Charlotte, okay? Ladies and gentlemen, does it really matter that it was a black guy that murdered a white girl? All murder is from the pit of hell. Murder is evil, and he should get the death penalty, but not because he was a black guy killing a white girl. I mean, whatever insane reason insane people use to murder, on the one hand, it's besides the point. You did murder.
But Eric, and there is an angle that we do need to talk about.
No, I know that, but that's before we get to that angle. Yeah. I want to be clear that, ladies and gentlemen, yes, you need to stand against racism. And what that means is you don't get lured into a racist point of view over this murder any more than you get lured into it over the George Floyd thing. Going to another break. We'll be right back. Welcome back, talking to John Zmirak. John, we're talking about this horrible, horrible, horrible murder in Charlotte. This unhinged madman, it's unbelievable. It is almost unbelievable for no reason. This was not a robbery. This was not an altercation. Just flat out murdered this young girl sitting by herself on the subway on the it's hard to believe.
Her name was Irina Zarutska. She was a Ukrainian refugee. Ironically, she would have been safer in Ukraine. There's actually, I just saw the statistics. There's a lower risk of civilians getting killed in Ukraine during the war than there is in Charlotte, North Carolina, because of the crime. There is tragically a racial angle to this that the devil is going to use. This was a schizophrenic, homeless, repeat offender who was repeatedly let go, repeatedly turned loose on the streets, in a city which George Soros targeted and the MacArthur Foundation targeted to reduce the jail population. Zara Mamdani is saying he's going to reduce the jail population in New York. That sounds like a good thing, right? Except what it means is they're going to turn loose psychos, schizophrenics, drug addicts, career criminals. They're going to turn them loose on the general population. This killer, this man who murdered this woman, had been arrested for calling 911 because he claimed that the government had put tracking devices inside his brain. Okay, this is not somebody who should be walking the streets. The judge who let him go, who is not even an attorney, is a lesbian married to a woman who runs drug rehab programs. So there's a question as to whether she was turning people loose to drum up business for her wife. The woman turned him loose with a written promise that he would appear for trial. The man who says the government has put tracking devices in his head and then goes on to kill a woman because he said she was reading his mind, this judge trusts him to show up for his court date and accepts his written promise. On that train, Megan Basham, our friend Megan Basham, posted a video. After the girl was stabbed, nobody helped her, nobody looked at her, nobody talked to her. And I wonder if there was a racial angle to that, because she was white, the killer was black, and all the bystanders were black, and they did nothing. To me, that video is every bit as shocking as the George Floyd arrest video. In fact, it's worse. George Floyd was a big career criminal hopped up on drugs resisting arrest, and police used excessive force, in courts determined. And they railroaded the cops into prison, including the ones who were trying to protect George Floyd. They went to prison too. It was a huge thing that resulted in Black Lives Matters protests all across the country, riots funded by George Soros NGOs. I don't want to see White Lives Matter emerge. I don't want to see white rioters going out in the streets. But the fact that it's okay to have black solidarity, it's okay to have Hispanic solidarity. But meanwhile, university presidents are saying we need to eliminate whiteness. There are courses in eliminating whiteness at state universities. There are books about the evil of whiteness. When you keep bashing a group, as whites are being bashed in America and natives are being bashed in European countries by immigrants, especially in Britain, you're eventually going to create that toxic white nationalist movement that we're trying to criticize, that we're trying to forestall. You keep bashing people, eventually they band together and they're going to go to a dark place. And I'm very worried about it. I'm worried that the left purposely releases criminals on the streets because they want anarchy so that they can impose tyranny. They're purposely doing that. They're also goading the emergence of white resentment. And white people, every time black bystanders don't help a white person, probably because they're white, that encourages that white racism. And that is what tears countries apart. My family comes from the former Yugoslavia. I know how countries get torn apart by ethnic nationalism. When you keep bashing one group and say it's not allowed to stick up for itself, you're not allowed to defend yourself, you're not allowed to feel any solidarity with people who look like you, everybody else can do that, double standards never last. And it's going to create the exact kind of tribalism that Dietrich Bonhoeffer stood against, that you and I have stood against. It feels inevitable, and I'm really scared.
Yeah, well, this is why the only real answer to this ultimately is Christian faith. Right. If you love God, you do not see the color of the person's skin. You don't see it that way. If you don't love God, if you don't know the God of the Bible, you're going to be tempted to see the world along racial lines. That's what people do. Tribalism is natural in the worst way, just like sin is natural. We are naturally fallen. We need the supernatural grace of God to deliver us from our natural state, which is to say, if you look like me, I like you. God wants to come into our lives to give us his perspective. And his perspective is that we love people. It has nothing to do with how they look. So whether you're black or you're white, you're going to have a temptation to be sucked along these lines and to think, oh, great, that's one for our side. Well, no, it's not one for your side. If somebody on the other side gets killed, it's not for your side, it's for the devil's side.
Exactly. Donald Trump is trying to build a movement, the MAGA movement, that's based on love of America, of citizenship, of law and order, of people having decent lives. I mean, he's sending National Guard units to blue cities where nobody voted for him to protect them from violent crime. A real racist would say, man, you know what? Let them kill each other. They didn't vote for me anyway. That's how the Democrats would act. And in fact, the Democrats are even willing to encourage violent crime that kills their own voters. They're so committed to anarcho-tyranny. Create anarchy, then you can impose tyranny. And I've written about this many times at the stream. I got a column from a couple of days ago. The point is to create anarchy so that you can impose tyranny. Right now in Great Britain, they have imported millions of Muslims to colonize the country, allowed them to rape local girls. The police have allowed rape gangs to operate, targeting native British girls. And now when there's outrage over it, there's fear of crime. Now the government is using that as a pretext to impose digital ID on everyone so they can track everyone. They're using anarchy to impose tyranny.
We'll be right back talking to John Zmirak. Go to stream.org, stream.org. Read what John writes, please, and share it. Welcome back, talking to John Zmirak. John, we're talking about a lot of stuff here. And
It's
it's
clear.
hard because people are being confused. And I want to just reiterate, folks, God wants us to know him personally, because he wants to lead us. The only way out of this is with God. Otherwise, you will be tempted in one direction or the other, whether it's into the woke left lunacy or into the rightist, Nick Fuentes, Milo Yiannopoulos, hate the Jews, lunacy, whatever it is. God is the only one who can lead us through this in the right direction. And we're seeing a country riven by very dark forces, and we need to be clear about what they are on the left, on the so-called right, so that we don't get lured in either of those directions.
And it's clear the Democrats are the party of chaos and crime. Joe Biden and Kamala Harris let millions of illegals into the country. They shut down border enforcement. They also shut down the program that Trump had put in place to do DNA testing to make sure that unaccompanied minors, like little Honduran kids, 10 years old, who are smuggled across the border, that the people who claim to be their relatives were in fact related to them. The Trump administration was trying to check that so they didn't get sent to sex traffickers and people who run sweatshops. One of the first things Biden did was get rid of that. 450,000 children were lost. The government doesn't know where they ended up. The Trump administration has started to rescue these kids. They have so far found 23,000 of these little brown kids who the Democrats threw to the wolves, and they found that some of them are dead, some of them were being sex trafficked, some of them were working as slave laborers to pay off the cartels that had smuggled them into the country. This is what the Democrats want. They want this kind of chaos so that they can then step in and impose tyranny as the only alternative. That you saw that during the COVID panic. First, they whip us up into a panic with footage of people dying in Italian hospitals. And, oh, we're all going to die. So then what do? Lock us in our homes, close our churches, forcibly vaccinate us with an untested, dangerous vaccine derived from vivisected babies. That's right. The COVID vaccine was made from a baby who was taken out of the womb alive so that his organs could be harvested. That's where the COVID vaccine comes from. That's why I refuse to take it. They used the chaos, the terror of the panic over the COVID vaccine, which, by the way, Anthony Fauci created in a lab with U.S. taxpayer money. It got released on the public, and they used that to impose tyranny. They were setting up internment camps in Australia and New Zealand for the unvaccinated. And our own Center for Disease Control was looking at doing it too. It was on its website. So again, when the Democrats are soft on crime, it's because they're really, really excited about the tyranny that they can impose once the chaos happens. When these transgender lunatics shoot up Christian churches, what happens? Oh, we have to take everyone's guns. I wrote a whole book, No Second Amendment, No First, about the profound link between gun rights and liberty. The left lets these transgender people, gives them all these hormones, tells them that they've been oppressed by an evil heterosexist conspiracy for millions of years. Transgender people have not been recognized by the government. You've been oppressed. Then they form armed militias, which they are. There are armed transgender militias that target Christian churches. And then when it happens, they use that as a pretext to disarm us, law-abiding citizens. It's all.
I mean, it's hard. This is all hard to believe. And again, folks, don't get, do not fret, but just ask God to lead you to understand this, because it is important. But anyway, when we come back, we've got a final segment with John. We'll continue talking about this. And then I'm talking to Jim Kunstler. Hey there, folks. I'm talking to my friend, John Zmirak. In a few minutes, we're talking to Jim Kunstler. Before we continue the conversation, I want to remind you a couple things. If you want autographed copies of most of my books, go to SocratesInTheCity.com. Our website, SocratesInTheCity.com. Autographed copies of most of my books and lots of other great books, lots of great stuff. Go to Socrates in the City website. Check us out on YouTube. A lot of good stuff. I also want to say our friend Mike Lindell, some of you know, you can go to mypillow.com and use the code ERIC. Please do, because it helps this program and we need the help. But if you go to mypillow.com, anything you buy, use the code Eric. And there's a link at mypillow.com to mystore.com, or you can go directly to mystore.com. But most of my books are available at mystore.com with the code Eric. Very inexpensive, very great prices. And my children's books, Donald Drains the Swamp, Donald the Caveman books, those are all available at mystore.com. You want those books. If you do not have those books, you want those books. Donald Drains the Swamp, Donald Builds the Wall, Donald and the Fake News. They're fun. They're great. They're funny, but they're also appropriate for kids, as you'll see. The Muggsy books, the Birthday ABC, but mystore.com, that's the Mike Lindell website, and use the code Eric. Okay, John Zmirak, we're talking about a lot of stuff here.
I want to talk about something a little more encouraging. I've got an article a book review over at Chronicles magazine, and Chronicles is a magazine everybody should read. It was right about the UN attacking Yugoslavia. It was right about the Iraq War. It's been right about immigration. It was right about Trump. It was out ahead of everything. I mean, all the things National Review was wrong on, Chronicles magazine was right about. I've got a review there of a wonderful new book from someone affiliated with the wonderful people at the Discovery Institute. Michael Egnor and Denise O'Leary have written a book called The Immortal Mind. I don't know if you're familiar with it.
I have interviewed that man on this program, and we will interview him probably for Socrates in the Studio.
Okay,
but that
great.
is an amazing book, and I'm happy to talk to you about it. And we did, if you want to watch my interview with him, Egnor is the last name, but I interviewed him a few months ago. Fantastic book, and you've written about it at Chronicles magazine.
That's right, and he adduces the scientific evidence for the immortality of the soul. And I think almost all our social problems can be traced back to people ceasing to believe that we are images of God, made in his likeness, who will live through eternity and face judgment after death. If you don't believe those things, you're essentially saying that you're an animal. And I'm not surprised when people who believe they are animals, who've been taught they're animals, start acting like animals and killing each other on public transportation and forming tribalist, racialist groups, banding together like bands of chimpanzees based on arbitrary characteristics. But he points to evidence of brain surgery, near-death experiences, just stuff that piles up in neuroscience journals that the ordinary public doesn't know. But the fact that people have near-death experiences, they have zero brain activity. Yet they're experiencing something. They can actually see what the doctors are doing and hear what they're saying and report on what's going on in the next room over. And when
the guy who wrote this book, Michael Egnor, Egnor, folks, he has done thousands of brain surgeries. Like, this is not some guy with a theory. It's unbelievable. And what this points up, John, is what I've been saying a lot in my book, Is Atheism Dead? The proof for the existence of God, the proof for the existence of our souls, right? It exists. It's not like, well, we've got some evidence. It is open and shut. It's like, what proof do you have that the earth is not flat? Can you prove it? Yes. We actually can prove it. And so, of course, in my book, I go into evidence for God from science. This book by Michael Egnor, Egnor, it's open and shut, folks. It's not like, well, who knows? I mean, if you read it, if you read John's review of it at Chronicles magazine, or if you listen to my interview with him, or if you read the book, it's open and shut. And I think the good news, John, is that we're living at a time in history which you and I didn't maybe think we'd live to see, where the evidence for God has become overwhelming. There's a sea change happening in culture because of books like that one. There is something happening that, 40 years ago when we were in college, we just couldn't imagine it.
That's right. We were, when I was loudly Catholic at Yale, it was like I was some kind of primitive who the anthropology students wanted to study for clinging to these quaint antique beliefs from the Middle Ages. And of course, if you don't believe in the soul, you don't believe in free will, you don't believe you have a really rational mind, you think everything you're experiencing is a side effect of electrical impulses being shot through the meat inside your brain, how would you have access to any kind of abstract truths? How could you do math? How could you make scientific judgments? How can you come up with scientific theories, including scientific theories like materialism that denies the soul? These theories eat themselves. They say that we're not free, our minds aren't really rational, they're just a side effect of the brain. Well, then they wouldn't be able to say that. They wouldn't be able to come up with anything that's objectively true. Um, these are theories that eat their own tail. And I encourage people to read my review of Road Chronicles and read the book, The Immortal Mind.
The Immortal Mind. Now tell me, who is behind Chronicles magazine? That's so great to know that it's out there.
Oh, it's been around for, like 50 years. And it's sort of aligned with the Pat Buchanan school of conservatism, which has been largely vindicated. Pat Buchanan was right about pretty much everything he ever said, everything he warned us about, all the books that people dismissed back in the 90s. They said he was extremist. They tried to paint him as like a Nick Fuentes type. And Nick Fuentes, by the way, tries to appropriate him, tries to claim that he is the real follower of Pat Buchanan, but he's not. Pat Buchanan is a patriot and an American nationalist who loves all his fellow citizens because they're his fellow citizens, and he's a Christian. Whereas I don't think people like Nick Fuentes actually believe in God.
Well, actually, I'm glad you just said that. This is the most diabolical thing of all. Nick Fuentes, horrible person that he is, claims to be a Christian. And ladies and gentlemen, I'm here to tell you that is truly diabolical when somebody who is espousing beliefs that are from the dark side claims to be a Christian.
What he means by Christian, what he means, he says he's a Christian. He just means I'm not a Jew.
That's exactly right.
And that has a very dark history. And you can go back to the Middle Ages where Christians acted like Gentile nationalists. And they were Christian in the sense that they were not Jews. And they were not
Muslims. It's like the Nazis who said we're Christians.
Right.
They were not Christians. They were Jew haters who thought the opposite of a Jew is a Christian. No, the opposite of Jew is a Gentile. And these were hateful, demonically influenced Gentiles. And Nick Fuentes, when he talks and he says he's a Christian, I just thought, oh my gosh, there are going to be people that believe that. And again, they think of Christianity as a tribal identity. I'm white, I'm Christian, I'm against the Jews, I'm against. It's very confusing. So that's why you have to be careful. And that's John and I are here to help you to understand what's going on, because it is really dark.
It's dark out there. These are wild times.
It is now, John. We've got a moment left. I just have to tell you, in case you missed it, 2 days ago, I happened to have the privilege of being with President Trump. I pitched him on my idea. I said, I think we need to call the 250th celebration the Super Centennial, just by fiat. Like we say, that's the Gulf of America, done. We need to just say, this is our Super Centennial. It's America's Super Centennial. He said, oh, I think it's a good idea. And I thought, well, he's just yesing me. And, what? 20 minutes later, he announces it to the world in his speech and tells his staff, because whoever's here working for me, okay, let's get it done. We're going to switch it. It's going to be Super Centennial. That is one of the craziest things I've ever experienced in my life. It happened. So now the 250th is going to be called a Super Centennial. I don't know what that means, where that goes, but just wanted to remind everybody. John, thanks for coming on. In a moment, Jim Kunstler, don't go away.